interesting week in cruising. Am I right? We've got another cruiser arrested story, this time coming from Galveston, Texas. And then we've got a story from a sweet curvy girl that wants to know what you think about her bathing suit choice. Yeah, that's a wild one. All that and more on today's episode. Let's go. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to La Lita Loca. I'm your host, Tony, here to talk you through everything going on in cruising. And well, it's a cruise show on a Saturday for your face. I hope you're buckled in because I've got some stories for you that are gonna make your hair fly up. And even if you don't have any hair, it's gonna make your hair fly up. The first story is we have a cruise, and this is a real challenge for cruise companies, a real challenge because at its heart, cruising is international travel. It's people leaving primarily, North American cruising. It's people leaving primarily North America, going to a foreign country, coming back to North America. And there's a big challenge with the borders in North America. Big challenge with borders everywhere. I don't want to exclude the rest of the world, but particularly when it comes to the United States, there's a drug problem. And there's people that use cruise ships to try to bring drugs into the country. And now a Texas man has been arrested for such an activity, alleged. That's what he is accused of. The website Cruise Law News is reporting that 63-year-old Harmony of the Seas cruise passenger Jeffrey Don Kunke has been apprehended by the Galveston Police Department for possessing more than 70 grams of heroin mixed with fentanyl and nearly 100 grams of THC vape oil. Conke was flagged by Customs and Border Protection for a more detailed screening because in 2018 he had been encountered bringing marijuana through border crossing. Texas man was booked into Galveston jail but later released on $75,000 bond. It's just another story of how sometimes cruising, which is inherently safe, is not all puppy dogs and rainbows. We talked about the story the other day about the passenger that was beaten unconscious by teenagers on a Royal Caribbean ship. And I said in that show that sometimes you have to be careful when you're confronting strangers on a cruise ship. A lot of people got upset saying, hey, look, the person should be able to, confront teenagers if they're doing something wrong. And you should be able to confront anybody, I guess, in any circumstance. And certainly I agree with the should. If you see somebody doing something wrong, you should be able to confront them. And there's really nothing stopping you from confronting someone who is doing something wrong. The point that I was making the other day is that I think a lot of people are lulled into a sense that when you're on a cruise ship, that everything is super safe and that every person that's on a cruise ship is not likely to do something violent. And the point that I was making the other day is that you should be very cautious when confronting strangers anywhere. And you should also include cruise ships in that anywhere. If the guy had on a t-shirt in the elevator that said, if you tell me not to jump up and down, in the elevator, I'm going to beat you unconscious, how likely would you be to tell the guy to quit jumping up and down in the elevator? But the unfortunate thing is nobody's really wearing a t-shirt saying what they're into. Nobody's saying that, hey, I'm likely to beat you unconscious, or nobody's saying, I'm into some weird stuff that could get me arrested, or that I'm smuggling something. Nobody has those t-shirts on, and I think the challenge is we lull ourselves into a false sense of security. So when I said the other day that maybe the guy's best course of action was to say nothing, I was saying say nothing to the person that you did not know how they were going to react. I think if he could have exited himself from the elevator without getting into an altercation, they had a verbal altercation. He said something to them twice. They said something back to him. And then, of course, it got violent when he tried to get out of the elevator. But, in that circumstance, I feel like I would have just tried to exit the elevator. If they were jumping up and down, I probably would have said nothing, tried to exit the elevator and went and notified security. That's what I would have done. Because, again, I don't know the stranger that I'm confronting if they have a proclivity to violence, and I don't think I want to get beaten unconscious over an elevator incident. That's where I'm coming from that. Now, people could be different. There might be people that say, hey, the guy was able to say what he was supposed to say, and the consequence was getting beaten unconscious, but at least he got to say what he should have said. which again, that might work for you, but I'm not looking to get beaten. There's things I will get beaten unconscious for: my family, protecting my family, those kind of things, my faith, you can beat me unconscious for that. But I'm not going to take a beating on an elevator just because I want to say something. I guess just to reiterate the big point so people don't get it twisted, be careful confronting strangers on cruise ships, because again, you don't know how they're going to react to that confrontation. And we have several examples where people do not react in the way that we think they would. They react with violence and people get injured. And that's bad. People getting injured for no good reason at the end of the day, I feel like that's bad. So that is my message. And yeah, just be careful out there. Now, as much as I want to jump right to the curvy girl has questions about her bathing suit, which is a pretty interesting story, I do have some other interesting cruise news for you. Port Canaveral just had their best month ever. I love this. Cruise port. So Port Canaveral, now the second busiest cruise port in the world. At one point, they were the first busiest. They'd taken that title away from Miami, but then Miami came back and they took it back from Port Canaveral. So we got a little, Pepsi, Coca-Cola going back and forth. Would Galveston be RC Cola in that? I don't know. Pepsi, Coca-Cola. I heard a story the other day of how Dr. Pepper got its name. Apparently the inventor, I'll give you the short story. The inventor of Dr. Pepper was angry because he was in love with a girl and her father basically made it so that they could not be together. He made her like a soda pop at the drugstore that he was working at. She loved it, thought it was the best thing ever. But then the father stepped in and made sure that they couldn't love each other. And so he went to Texas and became a famous drink maker. And he called the drink Dr. Pepper after the doctor that he was angry at. So Dr. Pepper is a spite drink. So really, maybe sometime if you want to show spite towards somebody, give them a Dr. Pepper. But there's that. But Port Canaveral, best week ever. They had passenger movements equaling 925,994 guests in March. And that was passing last year's March passenger count by 16%. Busiest month in history. They're expecting to do 8.4 million cruise passengers in Port Canaveral this year. That's compared to 7.6 million last year. It's pretty interesting. I mean, that 925,000, they're only 75,000 passenger movements away from doing 1 million passenger movements in a month. And then if they can do that month after month, well, you can do the math on it. That would be 12 million in a year. That's insane. That's a lot of people. Fortunately, you're starting to see some infrastructure improvements in Port Canaveral. But when I first started going to Port Canaveral, you could get in and out of there easy, pretty quick. Now it's a little more congested, and I've said this before, a lot of times, growth outpaces the growth of an industry will often outpace growth of the infrastructure. That's certainly what you see in a lot of these cruise port areas. You need more roads, you need more parking, you need that major moving people in and out infrastructure. And Port Canaveral struggles, Miami struggles, Galveston struggles because cruising's exploding, but the infrastructure is slowly catching up. But yeah, congratulations, PC, for the best month ever. Will you overtake? Will you become Coke or Pepsi instead of RC? Or who would be the spiteful Dr. Pepper of the cruise ports? Mobile? No, Mobile's back. They got 2 ships, and I don't think they're spiteful. I think they're happy. They're happy. This is an interesting story. Often we hear about cruise passengers being medically evacuated from a cruise ship. But we had an incident that occurred just a couple days ago where a crew member was medically evacuated from a cruise ship, evacuated from the expedition cruise ship, the National Geographic Venture. This occurred 15 miles offshore of Coos Bay, Oregon on Easter Sunday. Coast Guard was notified about a crew member that was sick with vomiting and other issues. They talked to a surgeon on the phone, and the surgeon said, well, you need to go get this person. So the Coast Guard from that area flew out and they picked up the crew member and they brought him back to the hospital where he is stabilized and doing better. But yeah, certainly an interesting story and another kind of look at an interesting aspect of cruising. There are medical facilities on cruise ships, big and small, but not all the time can the medical facilities take care of everybody. So a good story to remind you to have travel insurance and have travel insurance that covers Medevac. I'll leave a link to a place where you can get free travel insurance quotes in the main description there and in the first comment. But yeah, please don't cruise without having medical insurance, travel insurance, cruise insurance. You can usually get that all in one policy, but make sure that there is a Medevac rider for a lot of money in your travel insurance. I'm not an expert at travel insurance, but for me, I want to make sure I've got, multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars because, it's expensive. It's expensive. But yeah, hope the crew member recovers well. Well, would you look at the time? You know what time it is. Dance break. Get up. Get up. There you go. I tell you what, a few months ago, the lovely Jenny B purchased me a turntable and I have been vinyl obsessed. I went to the record store yesterday and I picked up a first pressing of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon and a first pressing of Van Halen 1984. I wasn't expecting to pick that up yesterday, but I went to a record shop there in Tampa that I'd never been to before, Micro Grooves. What a cool record shop. Right on the thing, the guy wrote all the condition notes. It was pretty cool. I'm still looking for Steely Dan. They had a shrink-wrapped, brand new first pressing of Steely Dan Asia, but it was $100. And I'm really trying to not spend more than like $20 or $30 on a record, even if that. But so that's the question I'm struggling with as a vinyl collector. I've been listening to Asia and the first Steely Dan album. I've been listening to it on streaming. I could just buy the most recent pressing on Amazon, but what do you think? Are you a vinyl collector out there? I know this doesn't really have anything to do with cruising, but some cruise ships, Virgin has records. Would you get just a new pressing so the vinyl sounds good, or do you like the idea of having the first pressing? The latest pressing or the first pressing of the Steely Dan? That's the big question. To do your dirty work, oh yeah. I don't wanna do your dirty work no more. That song is so good. I don't really know what it's about, but it's so good. Shout out Ludacris. Okay, so this question was posed by a 23-year-old on the Celebrity Cruises subreddit. This is what she said. I'm a 23-year-old woman and a very much just lay by the pool and tan type person, so my swimsuits tend to be more on the cheeky side, especially because I'm somewhat curvy, so I find finding full coverage bottoms is practically impossible anyways. My concern is, am I going to offend people if I'm walking around the pool deck in a small bikini? I want a nice tan, but I also don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. If it's a more modest vibe, I'll wear a one piece if needed. This is an interesting question, and I don't really know how to answer it, so I thought I would bring it up and throw it out there. We live in an interesting time where modesty tends to be defined relatively by the person who is wearing whatever they're going to wear. I mean, is there still a group modesty out there? Do you think anything should go, as long as you're within the rules, right? Like most cruise lines don't allow women to be topless, that kind of thing. But like, there's no hard rules, I don't think, against being, showing your cheeks, because I've been on a lot of cruise lines where people have been cheeky. There's certainly no prohibition against men, highlighting their assets in Speedos. It's an interesting question. Do you think that there should be modesty rules for cruise ships? Or do you think that people should be, go on a cruise going, people are going to wear what they want to wear? There was some good commentary in the comments of that subreddit. People are saying, look, wear what you want poolside while you're getting your tan on, while you're in your lounger chair. But if you're up and about going into public areas, make sure that you cover up. I think that's probably fair advice. What do you think? Are you telling your kids, if you're worried about that kind of thing, are you telling them before you go on a cruise that you may see some stuff that, you're not normally used to seeing? Or, do we just live in a time where most people let it all hang out, and they should? I've left a very specific question about that in the first comment below. And if you want to keep up with everything going on in cruising, make sure you watch this video next. This is Tony for La Lido Loca. Until the next time, we'll see you on the Lido. Bye.